This is Refilwe Moloto on Breakfast.
Women in business. We have these women in business joining us on our panel today. Lydia Shadrack-Rosino, hello. Welcome to Breakfast with Refilwe. How are you this morning?
Very well, thank you, Refilwe.
Alrighty. Lydia is the director of ENS Africa. And Fulu Makwetla, how are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you, Refilwe?
Excellent. Always lovely to see you. Fulu being the director on the board of the South African Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, or SAVCA. Tepo Matamate is also in studio with us, joining in support of the ladies. All right, so our panel is with the two of you. We want to talk a little bit about the role of women in business, and this, of course, comes on the back of or in conjunction with the SAVCA private equity conference that's on the go this week in Stellenbosch. I understand this topic is coming up there as well. Please, first of all, as if we need to, just frame the importance of women in business.
So, how can I put this? Well, let's put it simply. Women are critical for business in South Africa, especially African women, because African women are strong, resilient, courageous women, and that's the type of women you need in the business world. So, other than to say critical,
of course. Now, lots of studies, Harvard Business Review, and I think Deloitte and the like, have all put forward the stats and the data that say women are good for business. Women help improve returns. Women help manage in terms of risk management. For you guys in venture capital, for example, portfolio management, more attention is paid to externalities that aren't necessarily just profit-driven when women are on boards or helping with portfolio management decisions. Is that something that you've seen in the industry as well, Fulu?
Certainly. I think representation matters, first of all.
Yeah.
So it's good to have the women. If we look at the population of the country, women must be represented in all boardrooms, in all streams.
Right.
If we talk about performance, I think it's the skills that we bring to the board. If we look at our company, for example, it's woman-led, and there's a gentleman who's a partner of mine in the business. And in all decision-making, his style is very different from mine. My gut feel always guides me to say, okay, this is something too risky for me. He may have the risk appetite for it, and I balance him with my views. And so I think it's a pull and push kind of effort between the team for us.
Yes.
And I think the importance of having the women in the room is that we are at the center and at the core of the communities and what is needed in the communities. We understand the needs of the people where we come from. For example, I'm from Venda.
Yes.
It's a rural area. We know that we need markets. We need customers to get to market.
Right.
You see women providing for their families, selling fruit. How else can we get that fruit to Spar? How else can we get it to Pick and Pay? How else can we get it there and get them off the side of the market to get their product to more customers?
So, Lydia, you referred a little to African women, and I think this is what you're saying right now, Fulu, is very important. The stats also show that African women tend to be the drivers of decision-making in the home, and in many respects, the support of the home financially. So, let's take it into your industry. It doesn't seem to be represented that way. What is the current gender gap in South Africa?
So the gender gap is large, although we are doing much better than the US and the UK, in my view. And when I say in my view, this is from my experience of traveling to those places and meeting with people in the same industry in those places. So for instance, we do what we call in our world a door-knocking trip once a year to the UK, where I go and meet with UK law firms that we work closely with. And every time over the last 3 years, every time I've walked into those meetings, it's all men in blue or black suits.
Right.
And at first I was a little bit shy, and I didn't want to embarrass them actually by asking about it. But then I decided, no, I'm going to start asking about it because I want to know, where are the women? Because I thought I'd be going to the UK at all of these top law firms and I'd be seeing lots of women because their markets are more sophisticated than ours, right? They're so much further ahead than we are. And the answers I got were very shy looks and embarrassment, like I'd expected, because they said, no, it's a problem and we're doing really badly. And it's the same problem that we're having. We have lots of younger women coming up out of university through the junior ranks. But somehow, as they get closer to the senior level, they drop off. And the number of men far exceed the number of women at that level, which it makes no sense.
Now, I've seen this anecdotally and in research. You're quite right. I want to talk about something quite specific, for example, in your industry in terms of at the senior level. We recently had the Dealmaker Awards.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about that. There was not a single... I mean, you'll tell me because you're in the industry and you sit on the board of SAVCA. Are there women making deals?
Certainly.
All right. There was not a single woman nominated on the Dealmaker Award.
Yes.
Dealmaker of the Year, excuse me.
Absolutely correct. So Dealmaker of the Year has traditionally been that person in our industry that the industry nominates up for the Dealmaker Award that was involved in some of the largest deals in South Africa, some of the most high value deals in South Africa, and that people are seeing in and out of boardrooms all of the time leading the negotiations.
Right.
Traditionally, and because of what I said about the lack of female representation at the senior levels,
right.
there are not many people to nominate. And so it's not that as a result of Dealmakers, there wasn't women nominated for the award. It's the problem that we have, the fundamental problem that we are not, the sector is not transformed and that women are not fully empowered and women are not getting to those levels. So it's difficult for women to be nominated if you have 1 in 100 at that level. But we do have, Refilwe, we definitely do have women at that level.
Why do you think that's happening? Why do you think it is the case? I mean, some of the excuses that I sometimes hear are, when they get to a particular level, they want to have a family. Fulu, you're a mother.
I am a mom.
And you're a deal maker.
I am.
And you're a boss.
And
so what do you say to that excuse?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a valid enough excuse.
Right.
You have to create an environment in which women thrive, whether they have families or not. You have to be fair. You have to make sure that there's talent development at all levels. You have to give equal opportunities to all staff members, whether female or male.
Right.
And yes, there have been instances where one is not allocated a bonus because they were on maternity leave.
Right.
I've experienced it, but
Right.
I got up and I kept going, and look where I am. I am a business owner, I'm a mom,
Yes.
and I know the things that affected me, and so I can change that.
Right.
Because I've gone through it. I understand what it feels like to be excluded because you were on maternity leave, because you were not there when the company made money, but you were there when the company needed you. You worked hard, you put in the hours. And even on maternity leave, I worked.
Well, I was about to ask. So I know from when I was in asset management, I know women, particularly because it's so competitive, we act as if there are only 3 seats in a company of 100 for women. So if one woman steps out on maternity leave, she guards that seat with her life. I know of people rolling into the delivery room still on their email. And I'm curious, this is maybe a controversial question. I mean, is part of the adjustment of of our industries taking cognizance of the fact that, actually procreating and creating human life cannot be used against me from a bonus perspective, for example. Is it possible that we can change policy in that way?
We should. We are here to affect that change, right?
Right.
Because we know how it impacts us as women.
Right.
We are there to make sure that we are the policymakers.
Right.
We make sure that nobody is discriminated against. I mean, just as another thought, whenever I'm sitting on a board, I make sure that at least there's another woman.
Right.
And make sure that woman makes sure there's another woman, so that we start to find that balance. You can't be the only woman on a board. When you actually get invited on a board, you have to ask, so who are the other women on the board? What are you doing to get other women on the same board?
We've gone on the days of being the only one or the first.
Absolutely. It has to be intentional. But one of the other things that we're making good strides on, and the SAVCA board as an example, not necessarily just the board, but SAVCA itself has done a manager development program.
Brilliant.
And the exciting thing about that is that 7 out of the 13 managers that are on the program are actually women-owned. And so we're starting to see that change, and I think we're starting to see more inclusion in the industry and the growing of female talent in the industry. So that's some exciting news.
Absolutely. 2 WhatsApps that have come through from our listeners. One saying, Refilwe, when do we move away from having discussions about women in business to a point where women, in whatever they place they take in society, is the norm, rather than trying to continue having them fight for their place in the socioeconomic situations? Will these inequalities continue forever? And then another WhatsApp saying, I once commended companies for admitting, as you were mentioning, Lydia, that they weren't doing well, but that simply isn't good enough anymore. Now, just before we headed off into the break, we had some challenges from you. One person saying, it's not good enough anymore to say, we're having it quite bad. We're struggling to actually see the diversity. And it kind of rings a bell to when we were talking about racial transformation, and people would be like, we can't find the talent, and it's just not a good enough excuse anymore. So what was your response to that, Lydia?
So absolutely 100% agree. We need to stop talking about the fact that there is a problem, and we need to stop focusing on the problem and, oh, it's so bad. We really need to start finding solutions. And actually people have already put their heads together and have started working together, men and women, to be fair, to find these solutions. So I'm going to be moderating a panel at SAFCA on Thursday morning, and that panel is on gender dynamics in the private equity industry. And one of the things I'm going to, without giving too much away, start with is no more talking about the problems. We're going to be focusing on the solutions. And one of the solutions is, how do we coexist, and how do we coexist optimally? Because I think we have to admit that men and women are very, very different and bring very different things to the table. And together, if we accepted each other for what each other brings to the table, we could do so much. And therefore, let's start finding the solutions and implementing the solutions. And actually, back there in the streets, in the trenches, there's so much happening. I mean, women are out there literally fighting every day for their place at the table. And yes, I know there's going to be that voice that says, but why do we have to fight? Unfortunately, right now...
Like that listener did, yeah.
Yes, right now, we have to fight.
And it's a tooth and nail fight, right? I mean, so your guys' stats from SAFCA's report, 2019 annual report, 70% of the private equity sector is made up of men in South Africa. I mean, that's quite shocking, because we've been in this business for a long time. And then 11% of senior investment partners are women. Less than 7% of the capital invested within the industry is invested by women. Is invested in women-led companies. Right. That's from a report by the IFC called "Moving Towards Gender Balance in Private Equity and Venture Capital." Now, that fight can happen on the one part with women, but on the other hand, men have to make space. So who's going to give up their seat at the table?
You don't have to give up your seat.
Okay.
You just have to be intentional about growing the talent.
And the table.
And growing... No, the table... There's certainly enough for everybody.
Okay.
Nobody's going to lose their jobs because they've included another woman.
Right.
Nobody's going to lose anything because they've included somebody, because there's job opportunities. We just have to give equal opportunities to boys and girls.
Right.
We have to develop the talent. It's a very specialized field. So you can't not train people up.
Right.
Because you have to be intentional. To get them up there, you have to train them. You have to develop them. You have to invest in them. And so don't leave anyone behind. Don't go searching and saying, well, we can't find anyone. Well, did you develop anyone?
So I work in the asset management space, as you ladies know, and sometimes for mandates, we kind of insist in certain mandates we want to see this many women in place, and not just driven by the transformation codes that we've seen in the financial sector, but the excuses continue to come that we can't find them, or the research does show sometimes women are the ones who maybe don't see themselves in the C-suite. They step up when it's a crisis. If we have to think about Theresa May, if we have to think about the lady who took over KPMG, her name escapes me at the moment, it seems to be in crisis when we're like, actually, I can fix this, but we don't necessarily move forward to say, actually, I could have just been at the table anyway. What can we change in terms of our mindsets as women? And maybe that's too broad and esoteric a question, but it's an important one, I think.
So I think that women, traditionally, again, men and women were very different in these aspects, because men stood up very quickly and put their hands up to do something on the front line.
The confidence.
It's the
even in mediocrity,
yes. And the women sat back, and most women waited to be asked to step up. Yet they could both perform, and maybe the woman could do it better than the man in certain circumstances. But if you're waiting to be asked to do something, you're going to wait a long time sometimes. So if I could dispense a little bit of advice, and that would be to the women out there listening: step up.
Yeah.
If you know you can do something, put your hand up. Get out there. Make yourself front and center. Don't wait for other people to do it.
I'm going to add to that and I would say be audacious, even if you're not entirely sure you can do it.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
what we found actually with men is that even when they have 60% of the ability, they will take up 100% of the opportunity.
Absolutely. And that's what the fight is about.
Right.
Fight for that position. Go for it. Get it.
I love it. One last WhatsApp here that says, enjoying the show about women in top management positions. I think men are more willing to give up family time and deep relationships for financial and power gains. Women tend to view the world differently and are not willing to sacrifice everything for power and glory. That's why we need them in those high positions to balance out our testosterone. I'll leave it on that note. Insofar as I do think there might be some truth to that. However, you guys are proof that you can actually have it all. It can be a balanced perspective. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for this particular panel. One last voice note over here, please, Mario, on parents in the workplace.
Refilwe, so one of the solutions is parental transition coaching to support parents through the maternity-paternity transition. And that way the research is showing that we keep our women in the workplace, or we keep them in their career path rather than alienating them and ostracizing them. That's one of the solutions.
We love Cape Talk because you've always got the brilliant ideas. Lydia Shadrack-Rosino, Director of ENS Africa, Fulu Makwetla, Director on the Board of the South African Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, or SAVCA. Thank you so much for joining us for our Wednesday panel on gender diversity, and all the best for your panel at the SAVCA conference tomorrow morning, Lydia, and for the remainder of the SAVCA conference this week.